All right, let's see how we can solve this problem. So we get the input and check to see if input is divisible by 3. Then we can set a variable like result to fizz. Now let me temporarily simplify these rules because I want to show you a really cool technique. So let's imagine if the input is divisible by 3, we'll return fizz. Otherwise, we'll return buzz. So else colon, we set the result to buzz, and finally we'll return this result variable. This is one way to implement these rules, but it's not the best way. There is a better and cleaner way. Let me show you. So instead of defining this result variable and then returning it, we can simply return this string here and also here, and then we can get rid of line 6. So we remove one unnecessary line of code. This was one technique. The other technique I want to show you is when you have an if statement and in your if block, you're returning a value, you don't really need an else clause. Because if this condition is evaluated to false, the control moves to the else clause, and all we are doing here is returning a different value. So this is the only possible outcome. So here we can remove this else clause and simply return buzz. So with this technique, I removed an unnecessary indentation as well. I've made our code more linear, okay? Now, let's go back to our original algorithm. So if the input is divisible by 3, we'll return fizz. Now we check to see if the input is divisible by 5, we'll return buzz. So here, we don't really need an elif, because if this condition is false, we'll get here anyway. So we can check if input is divisible by 5, we will return buzz. Once again, if this condition is false, the control moves here. Now we check to see if the input is divisible by 3 and it is also divisible by 5, then we will return fizz buzz. Now, this expression is a little bit long. I would prefer to make it more readable by putting parentheses around the first and second parts, like this. That is cleaner. Now, if this condition is also false, the control moves here. That means our number is not divisible by 3 or 5, so we should simply return the same input. Once again, we don't need an else or another if. We simply return the input. Now let's run this program and see if it's working properly or not. So we call our function with 3 and we get fizz, beautiful. Let's call it with 5. We get buzz, perfect. What if we call it with 15? We should get fizz buzz. However, we get fizz. What is going on here? The reason this happened was because when we pass 15 here, line 2 is executed. Obviously, 15 is divisible by 3, so that is why we immediately return fizz. To solve this problem, we need to move this condition, which is more specific, to the top. So I've selected these two lines using Alt and up. I move these lines up, beautiful. All right, now let's run the program one more time. So we get fizz buzz. Once again, let's test it with 3. Now we get fizz. Let's test it with 5. When writing functions, don't assume that your function is working. Make sure to test it with all different kinds of values. Let's test it with 5. We get buzz, beautiful. What if we pass 7, which is not divisible by 3 or 5? We get 7, beautiful. So what you see here is the simplest and most elegant implementation of the fizz-buzz algorithm. And that brings us to the end of this section. In the next lecture, we're going to explore data structures in Python. We're going to learn about lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries. I hope you enjoyed this section, and thank you for watching.